Hello there, how you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Yes, I'm great, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So tell me, what first brought your attention to the Brinks-Mat heist of 1983?
Well, I was always aware of the robbery growing up. It was a very infamous robbery in the UK. But about 5 years ago, I spoke to people who were considering looking at it as a film, and I properly looked into the story. And I was just immediately attracted to the complexity of it. I mean, one of the first things I realized is this is a lot more than a film. I think you should be telling it across a bigger canvas. And it was just the more research I did, the more fascinating and surprising the story is.
Crazy. So you wrote this as a series. This was never a story. This was never going to be a book. You wrote this to be what it is.
I wrote it as a television drama series, and then after the researcher and I had done a lot of the research, we decided to turn the research into a book. So there's a book that came out with the transmission of the show in the UK, but that was very much us turning our research into something. But it was my focus was always on the television series and the dramatization.
Okay. Okay. So when you go into researching real life events like this, how do you balance the historical aspects with what you know you want to be the entertainment aspects of the story?
I think the big thing is just doing your research. I think putting the work in. I mean, we did 6 months full time research, and then it was ongoing from there. It didn't end. So we're trawling through newspaper archives from the 1980s, piecing together a very complicated story of lots of disparate events into sort of jigsawing it together. Lots of interviews. I tracked down Brian Boyce, which Hugh Bonneville plays in the show, who was the lead detective in the Brinks-Mat task force. He'd never spoken to anyone at great length. He was hard to find. And when I found him, I then had to persuade him to talk to me. So it was, I spoke to him maybe a dozen times while I was researching the show. I spoke to lots of other people. So I think if you do that research and you give yourself a really comprehensive understanding of the story, then I think you can go into the dramatization with a clear conscience. I think the big thing about creative license is you need to know when you're using creative license. You're not just kind of fudging things because you're not sure what happened. So put the work in, and then I think creative license becomes far easier and far more acceptable.
What sources did you find helped you the most when you were researching?
Probably Brian Boyce, the lead detective. Just hearing firsthand how he ran the investigation, the things that happened along the way, was really really helpful. There were some great books as well, and some fascinating newspaper articles. I mean, the great thing about the 1980s is people talk in a very different way in newspapers then. They give these quotes that are incredibly revealing because none of it's going online. It was just a different world. It was very innocent, if you like. So yeah, newspapers, books, and first-hand interviews were all invaluable.
Right, right. Do you remember the first paragraphs that you wrote for this series, and did they actually stay in the finished product?
Well, the first thing I thought with this series, which did stay in, was we need to get past the heist as quickly as possible. That was my big thought. This what's interesting with the story is what happens next. What happens after the famous bit, if you like, what happens after the robbery. And the heist is really interesting. There was lots of stuff I could have done. They spent months grooming the security guard in a really interesting, creepy way. Things went wrong in the day that they had to kind of deal with. There's another version of the show where the heist is a whole episode, but I just thought that's famous, that's known. I want to get past that, so that's why I kind of burn it off in the cold open, essentially.
Is there any of that footage that you feel is worthy of letting fans see after the fact, maybe on packaged media if they decide to release this as a Blu-ray or a DVD?
The footage of what? Sorry,
Pardon me?
footage of what specifically? Sorry.
Any of the cut scenes, any of the stuff that was
Oh, the
trimmed?
cutscenes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I took that into script, that structure of the heist being up top. There's not a huge amount that we cut. They were very lean scripts. They weren't long. I was aware that it was a very complicated show, and the last thing I needed was to hand in long scripts that we then had to film 5 pages we were never going to use. I think that there's bits of documentary out there that fans of the show could find that are really interesting. Just newspaper reports of the time, some interviews with some of the criminals involved. I mean, put it that the Brinks-Mat is a story that people can go down an internet rabbit hole for weeks, if not months.
Right, right. What do you feel your main job is as a writer creator once a project like The Gold starts into production and starts becoming film?
Just to make sure the story is being told in the most powerful way possible, that we're not that we're not valuing other aspects above that basic storytelling. Telling something cinematically is really exciting. I think that's great, and that's what we're always looking for. But how we tell the story, don't lose the story itself. I think that's always very important, and very important to me.
Now, the Gold has already been released and viewed in the UK, correct?
Yeah.
And what do you hope that your new global audiences are going to take away from this series that maybe would be a bit different from in the UK?
I think that I just hope it connects, because I think that I'm a writer who definitely values having themes. I think that's really interesting. I think there's some really interesting themes in the Gold, but I always see that as a secondary concern. My biggest thing is unashamedly entertaining the audience. And I'm just hoping that the story lands and the story grips and, draws people in. And that's what the show is designed to do ultimately. I think it's a really fascinating story, and hopefully we've told it in a gripping, pacey, exciting way. So I just hope people connect it on that kind of fundamental level, really.
Cool. Now, I'm assuming the Gold is a close-ended series. There's not going to be a second season.
Oh no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. No, I think there's more story to tell, and hopefully we'll get the chance to tell it.
Right on. That's awesome. I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thank you.
Cheers.